and energizing your inner power. And I hope that you will enjoy our second session for today by Dr. Nina Marie Taylor on mixed methods mix-up. And I think we kick off the session quite good and appropriate to the theme with all the mixed up with all the different groups. And I hope that Kirchner have managed to join us. So the mixed methods research is a research approach that combines both qualitative and quantitative methods in a single study. And this approach has become increasingly popular in many fields, as it allows researchers to gain a deeper understanding of complex phenomena that cannot be fully understood using a single method. And I can confirm that indeed we receive quite a lot of questions from students regarding mixed methods research. And I think this is going to be a very helpful session for our students. Dr. Nina Marie Taylor is from the university's Faculty of Military Science, and she has been employed at Stellenbosch since 2019. She holds a doctorate in economics from the University of Fort Hare, and above the economic models that she's responsible for, she has also specialized in research methodology and lectures research methodology to both honors and master students. And Dr. Nina is indeed well equipped for this session. Regarding the sessions and questions, since mixed methods can get very mixed up, Dr. Nina indicated that she would present for more or less 20 minutes, and then we'll take some questions for about 5 minutes, and then she will continue with her presentation for more or less 20 minutes, and then we'll right at the end use the rest of the time for questions as well. Kirchner, can you maybe give me an indication whether we can start with Dr. Nina's presentation? Can I also please ask all the attendees that join us that they would please mute yourself and switch off your camera? Thank you, Dr. Nina. I think you can go ahead and start with your session.
Okay, thank you everyone, and I'm just going to load up my slides quickly. All right. Sorry, I'm just waiting for them to arrive. So greetings to everyone from Saldanha, and it's really thank you for the privilege of being able to really speak to you about mixed methods. I hope that you can all see the slides. I'm going to put my camera off in a second.
We can see your slides, yes.
Okay, great. So I hope that this will be a session that is very informative, because I've actually called this the mixed method mix-up, because many people think that they know what mixed methods is about, and very often there's this trend of you mustn't just do quantitative or you mustn't just do qualitative. You must rather add this other part in it that is mixed methods. And what this presentation is really about is to please understand mixed methods in itself is huge. So I've tried to condense as much as I can, but I'm happy to also share the slides because they do provide a bit more detail. And my focus of this is really to show that with mixed methods, it's about a consideration of why are you doing this type of research? Is this type of research good for, or is it appropriate for what you are trying to study? And in terms of that, what sort of considerations do you need to make if you're going to do a mixed method? And also, what type of mixed method are you going to look at? So that is basically what the presentation is about. So I'm going to put off my camera and I'm going to go to slide 2. So I thought I'd start this out with just a few opening thoughts. And this is something that we often see in terms of presentations or of proposals or research. So why have I called it the mixed up with mixed methods. And very often you find that there's a notion that students or new researchers will say, I'm going to employ mixed methods, and I'm doing this because I'm employing both qualitative and quantitative. And my argument in this session is that mixed methods isn't just about having qualitative and quantitative, but it is also about something that joins these two approaches. So if you have a study which is just quantitative on one section, the next section is qualitative, then it's not technically mixed methods. In mixed methods research, the two somehow have to be put together and integrated in order for it to actually be mixed methods. So that's my first point. The second point is often we see students and researchers state the mixed methods, the qualitative part, I'm going to do a survey questionnaire with closed-ended questions, and the quantitative, I'm going to use descriptive statistics. And the issue here is that if you have a survey questionnaire that is closed-ended questions only, and these closed-ended questions are, for example, are you at work today? Yes, no. Those are what you call closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions is when you open it up. How are you feeling today? And you let the person explain. So technically in research theory, we state that if you have a survey questionnaire, which is closed-ended questions only, then it's actually quantitative and not qualitative. Also, another comment that's often made is, I'm going to use triangulation to validate the results. Sure, that's fine, but you need to explain how are you going to conduct triangulation? What are you going to do within triangulation? And what I will show you in this mixed methods presentation is that there are various forms of triangulation as well as other types of mixed method design. Okay, so then the triangulation is not the only mixed methods research design that exists. All right, so this is an overview of my presentation. I'm going to look at basically an overview of research methodological, oh, that's a tongue tie, twister mix-up, and I think there's a spelling mistake as well, but what are all the choices you have when you want to conduct research? Why would you focus on mixed methods? When should you use mixed methods? When shouldn't you use mixed methods? What are the characteristics of it? What are the considerations? And also, what are the steps for conducting it? And then most of the actual, some of it, please excuse me if I sort of skim past, but it depends on timing. What I really want to concentrate is the last part, which is actually mixed method research design. So I'm now going to go to slide 4. And what we have is methodological choice. So you have mono methods. So your mono methods are your quantitative and your qualitative. Quantitative, we know that is normally numeric. You're somehow measuring something. While your qualitative, you have interviews, you're getting more perspective. So from quantitative, you have the advantage of validating your results. So in quantitative, you have various diagnostic tests, ways to make sure that your results are valid, which is a key part of any research. The disadvantage of quantitative is that it lacks deeper insight. And that deeper insight you can only get really in your qualitative research. So with qualitative, that is when you have interviews or you're doing some form of observation, you then gain greater meaning. So if you're going to ask people in quantitative, are you having a challenge? They can say yes or no. That's quantitative. You can then verify your results. But under qualitative, you can then conduct an interview. And then you'll say, are you experiencing a challenge? And people will say, yes, I am. Explain it to me. And they'll give you more information. So what mixed methods is about is it takes the advantages of quantitative. In other words, it focuses on validating, it puts quantitative and qualitative together, but it also takes the advantages of both. So it's able to validate your results as well as give you deeper insight. And that is the focus of mixed methods. As you'll see on the right, we also have multiple methods. So you have mixed methods and you have multi-method. So multi-method could be in your study, you could be qualitative, but you use different type of qualitative approaches, such as an interview, a focus group, observations. Or it could be multiple quantitative, where you might use descriptive, survey, questionnaire, regressions. And sometimes even with multi-method, you have different qualitative and different quantitative, but they both answer different questions. Okay, I'm putting the camera on, sorry, it's... So what I'm saying to you here is that under multi-method, you could have, and please excuse me for my craziness, but under multi-method, you could have quantitative, you can have qualitative, and they are separate in your study, but what you're doing is each of these two are answering a different research question. While if it's mixed methods, you're using quantitative and qualitative, but they're both answering the same question. And that is the key to the difference between the two. So if you're just adding quantitative, you're just adding qualitative, but they're answering two different research questions, then it is multi-method. But if you have mixed methods, you're not just adding quantitative and qualitative, but also they're both answering the same research question. So you can already see the advantage of mixed methods because it's used in a study whereby you want to answer something, but you also want another method that can validate. And that's where mixed methods comes in. So it's the two different methods used to answer one question. And also something I'm going to point out quickly is if you're doing mixed methods, and I'll show it throughout the slides, is there's decisions you have to make. In other words, is this qualitative part going to be greater emphasis on it than the quantitative? Or is the quantitative part going to have greater priority or emphasis than the qualitative? Other decisions that we'll get to is also, for example, am I going to do the quantitative part and the qualitative part at the same time? Or am I going to do the quantitative part first? And then that will then give me answers that I can take into my qualitative. So do I want to see if students face challenges? Quantitative, I'd have a survey. Then maybe they say yes, no, or they give me areas. Then I can have qualitative, and the qualitative might be greater, but it is sequential. First comes quantitative, then comes qualitative. And the qualitative will wait to see what are these challenges so that it can then interview individuals on it. So that's basically what mixed methods is about. So then I'm finished. No, I'm not. I'm just joking. Sorry. All right. So also note that from your mono method to your mixed method, the complexity increases if you are going more mixed methods. But, and I'm going to stress this, it depends entirely on the topic that you are researching. So when you are considering mixed methods, don't just take it because it seems more complex. It depends entirely on your research problem. It depends entirely on your research topic. Some research topics you might only be able to answer if you take a qualitative route or if you take a quantitative route. So, for example, if I want to look at trade amongst African countries, and I want to look at the trade flows between these countries, I might not be able to take a qualitative route because the best way for me to study that would be quantitative. Right, so it's just an illustration. Right, so this is just basically speaking about the advantages of mixed methods, and there are a number of, as I said before, with qualitative, one of the biggest issues you have is to ensure validity, that your results are valid, because very often the problem with qualitative that the researcher always has to be careful and watch out for is that you're not including any form of subjective bias. While quantitative is very objective, but you're not getting that rich data, which often you really want. So mixed methods really combines the benefits of the two. The other part of it is that, and I'm going to stress this as well, is that qualitative has got very small sample sizes. If you're going to interview individuals, you can only interview a certain number. However, with quantitative, you're able to get larger numbers of your N in your population. And that is often very good because your larger your observations or your cross sections or individuals, the better it is, the better your results will be. Okay, so this is basically just talking about why do we emphasize it, and it's often because in today's world, problems have become much more complex. We also want to try and have a deep understanding. We also have greater availability of data, and maybe we want to gain a much more informed social picture of a phenomenon. Right, so under what scenarios should one actually conduct mixed methods? Okay, so first of all, when the integration of quantitative and qualitative can provide a better understanding for the research problem. So for example, if you want to know how your first year students are performing and challenges that they're facing, then it can include quantitative and qualitative. You could have a survey questionnaire and an interview. When a research wants to review a research questions from many perspectives, unexpected findings, and potential contradictions. So basically, you could have a question, but there is a lot of debate about that question. Therefore, you might want to include a mixed method that you actually validate your quantitative and your qualitative to provide some form of answer. When one method can be used to effectively substantiate the findings of another. So one of the key reasons one uses mixed methods is actually for this validation. But something I want to caution and stress here, and that is that if you're going to use a mixed method, one has to also be honest with yourself as a researcher, in the sense that some people are more qualitatively inclined. In other words, they feel more comfortable, they specialize more in qualitative, while others tend to be more quantitative. Okay, they understand quantitative easier, they're able to do it easier. We're not always sort of experts in both. So when you are doing any form of mixed methods, you have to be sort of an expert in both, depending on what type of mixed methods you want to explore. But if you're going to have specifically one where the qualitative has more priority over the quantitative, then you have to be an expert in terms of your qualitative or skilled in terms of it. Okay. So the various degrees of or characteristics, first of all, the interaction between the qualitative and the quantitative. And you'll see when I get to the actual designs, these characteristics really differentiate the type of mixed method research design one wants to choose. So you have to say, does one data set inform the other? In other words, if I have survey results, which is quantitative, does that then inform the qualitative part? I'm putting my camera on. I'm here. So if you have survey results, does that then inform another? What is the interaction between the two? Then the implementation of sequence. So in other words, when you are conducting the qualitative and the quantitative, are these two approaches occurring at the same time, or is one occurring before the other? So that's what we talk about in terms of simultaneous, they happen at the same time, sequential, they happen at different times. All right. The other part is priority, in the sense that with your data, which one, do they have equal weights? Does the qualitative and the quantitative, you have the same focus or emphasis on both of them? Or are you going to have a small quantitative and then a much larger qualitative? You can see I'm a lecturer, I talk with my hands, but you'll get me. Or are you going to have a larger quantitative and verify with a smaller qualitative? So these are the types of understanding one has to have when you're doing mixed methods. Also, the timing of the integration. So in other words, what is very important with mixed methods, which actually classes it on a different dimension, is that somewhere you have this merging of your information from quantitative and qualitative. So you've got to decide, where is that integration going to happen? Because it can occur at any point within the process. All right. So these are the different considerations. And basically, I've said a lot of this. So it's, where is this mixing? Where's the integration of the two coming together? What is the weighting, the time constraints, the emphasis on the sequence, and of course, the degree of complexity. All right. So here I've got, just looking at some of these, I'll put my camera off. So in terms of some of the considerations one has to make is concurrent. In other words, is the qualitative and the quantitative occurring at the same time? Or is one, in other words, qualitative, occurring before quantitative happens? And if you have the sequential, in other words, one happens before the other, is it going to be the quantitative approach first, or will it be the qualitative approach first? Then consideration is their weights. Is the focus and the emphasis going to treat both the qualitative and the quantitative equally? Or is either the qualitative or the quantitative going to be given a greater weight? I'm now on 13. Right. So this is very important, because what we've got here is, on the left-hand side, I've got concurrent, while on the right-hand side, I've got essential. And you'll see at the top, this is when they're given equal weights. And at the bottom part, you'll see that is where they are given, the one is given a greater weight compared to the other. And I just wanted to also just emphasize something here, and that is that when you see the qual or quant is in capital letters, that means the emphasis is on that one. So this is part of the mixed methods terminology, or how it's spoken, is that whenever you have the capital, that means that you have emphasis on that. So you can see, for example, you have both in the left, both the qualitative and quantitative occur at the same time. In the concurrent at the top, they both have the same weighting. But if you look at the dominant status below, you can see that either qualitative, they both occur at the same time, but my qualitative has given greater emphasis compared to quantitative, or quantitative has greater emphasis than qualitative. However, on the right, I have what we call sequential. In other words, at the top, they have equal status, and quantitative will occur before qualitative does, or qualitative will occur before quantitative. And the dominant status below, you'll see that These are different combinations, but one will occur before the other. This is what I'm speaking about in terms of the actual mixing of. So there's 3 ways they can be mixed. They can merge, they can be embedded, they can connect the data. So under merging, you've got to decide, are you going to merge during interpretation, or are you going to merge during analysis? So what we're saying here is it going to be that you are going to have results, and so say that you, on my camera. So is this a case of you are going to do interview and have results, and then survey questionnaire, have results, and then merge the information once you've interpreted and have results? Or are you going to interview, have the survey, and then somehow that information you're merging then? So you've got to decide, when do you merge those results? Also embed the data. In other words, are you going to say that you want to know about student challenges that they face? So you could have an interview, so qualitative would be your main one, but you want to verify that by doing a survey questionnaire. That would be your quantitative that you would then embed within your qualitative. And how are you going to connect the data? Does quantitative lead to qualitative, or does qualitative lead to quantitative? And I just wanted to, before I allow questions, if there's any, when you think about mixed methods, there are various types of considerations you've got to make. So you've got your primary, which are your core, and your secondary dimension. So your primary dimension is, what is the purpose of this? Why am I doing this? What is the theory drive behind it? Is it theory creation, or am I being more deductive? What is the timing? Is it simultaneous, or is it at the same time? Where am I going to integrate? Is it going to be an interactive design, or are you going to develop theory? From this, is the design going to be planned, or as you go along, can we have some form of emergent design? What is your degree of complexity? And similarly, with the secondary dimension, you're looking at the phenomenon, the social scientific theory behind it, the drive, combination of sampling methods. Okay, so in other words, you've got, say you've got interviews and you've got survey research. Survey research. You've got 2 different samples there. How are you going to find your sample? Are you going to use different methods or the same method for finding your sample? How are you going to combine these sampling methods? And what is the participation between your participants of the different methods you're using? Are they going to be similar? Are they going to be different? What is the type of implementing setting, and also the degree to which the methods are similar or not? And how are you going to validate your criteria and your strategies? Also, is this going to be a full study, or is it going to be multiple studies? And why that's stated is sometimes with the more complex mixed methods, you find that people will then do this within a team, and each team member will then sort of conduct different parts of it, which does also make sense, because I might be good at quantitative while someone else might be good at qualitative, but we're all working towards the same study. Okay, can we take questions?
Thank you, Dr. Dina. I really think in my mind, you've made it quite clearer what is mixed methods actually about, because it's difficult to know. And I think this last slide, this consideration in deciding, and also the fact that you can work in groups is very good to know, that you can focus on your strength. If it's qualitative, then you can add that specifically to the group. We're definitely going to open up now please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions, or you're more than welcome to also raise your hand. Let's use this time with Dr. Nina if you have any questions.
Okay, everyone seems fine.
I just see thumbs up. I think you can continue, but please feel free in the meantime. Oh, I saw a hand there, and you're more than welcome to use the chat as well. Please unmute yourself and just ask your question.
Hi, my name is Salome. Camera is off due to load shedding. I just need to understand if you can give me an example of embedding qualitative data into a quantitative study. Or embed, if you can just, you know.
Okay, thank you for
give
that.
us more examples of what embed means practically.
Okay, basically when you are doing embedded, as I will still show you, but I don't want to be the person to say, I'm still going to get there, don't worry. Basically, what you're doing is your whole focus. So say, for example, you want to look at, let's say, I'm just saying challenges people face due to load shedding, okay? So I could then have interviews with individuals or focus groups. That would be your qualitative, but that would take priority. But at the same time, I could have some sort of quantitative in the sense of I send out a survey to ask how many of you have got inverters, or I could look at the frequency of load shedding or whatever. So what you're doing is your core is the qualitative because you're finding out about challenges, but your embedded part is something else that's helping you to almost make your study more rich, if I can put it that way. While on the other way, if it was qualitative within quantitative, then what you could do is you could, for example, you want to look at statistics over time in terms of student grades to see how they're fared. You want to link it to COVID or whatever it is. And you find something, or maybe you find that over the past 2 years, grades have decreased. So that is your core part, but your qualitative could be that you interview individuals to find out, but it's a small part. Your focus here more is on the quantitative rather than the qualitative. The qualitative here is just used to verify what you're seeing from the data.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Nina, we have another question in the chat as well. Do you have suggestions for tools, programs to use when analyzing or working with a combination of quantitative and qualitative results?
It depends entirely on the actual method. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the method that you're using. So, for example, in terms of qualitative, many people prefer to use SPSS, or they like to use Atlas because Atlas helps you to code your actual data. If you are more quantitative, and here it depends entirely what you want to do and what you have access to, because certain programs or certain statistics packages cost money. So it depends entirely. Some people will use Gretel, they'll use R, they'll use eViews or even Status. So sometimes it depends on how complex it is. Sometimes you can do it on Excel. Sometimes you need a more serious statistics package to assist you. Yes.
So also a mixed sort of answer there. We have some more hands here. Jamie, you were next in line. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. Thank you so much for such a great session. I just wanted to find more about if this all applies to different, like all different fields, because I'm coming from a background of science, and I'm just wondering if this also includes that.
Okay. Thank you for asking that question. I think the whole thing, it depends, it really goes through any type of discipline. And something that I often hear, because I'm an economist, so often people will say, oh, quantitative, that's only economics. But having served on many high degrees committee, you often find the theory comes from your specific background, but the actual theory comes from your background, but the actual research design you can apply to any discipline. But I'm glad you did say science, because the other thing that I need to say is that it's very important to be aware of different research designs and then be able to say, I think that this design I could use in my study and why, and this design I don't think I can use it. So just because mixed methods is something that is favorable, that everyone wants to use, it depends entirely on your study and it depends entirely on your topic. And that is the key that I'm saying to you. So it really depends on the topic. It doesn't mean that here is something new, you have to use it. But it's better to be able to say, here is something, can I use it, can't I? If I can't use it, why? And be able to substantiate why you're not using it. Because very often when you've got to actually defend your research, you've got to be able to say, I'm using this method. I know that mixed methods is more popular, but I'm not using it because of something.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dr. Nina, we have another hand. Lerato, please unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
I'm sorry if you might have answered my question right in the beginning. Say, for an example, your topic is something related to team teaching in an undergraduate module that has large student numbers. And for the students, maybe you want to use a survey, and then for the lecturers, interviews. Would that still be considered as mixed methods? And what would the approach be? Can the two run concurrently? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think this is going to be the last question I'm going to take for now. My answer to you is that it depends entirely how you're going to integrate those two information. So you can have the two approaches, but if you report it and you say your research question says, what is the opinion of the students? The other one says, what is the opinion of the lecturers? And under your actual, how you report it, you show your findings of the lecturers and then your finding of the students, then it's not mixed methods. Then that is actually rather multi-methods. In other words, you've got two questions, two methods answering two different questions. You're not integrating the two. So that is the difference. And it doesn't mean necessarily that if you have a scenario like that, that you have to use mixed methods. There must be a reason why you would then consider it. I just want to see quickly, I saw a question here about what's the difference between a method and a design, right? So a method is, for example, survey questionnaire. I'm just giving an example. That's a method. That's a research method. A research design or research design is from the beginning of the research to the end. So in other words, what is your aim? How are you going to conduct it? How are you going to get your sample, your participants, and so forth? That then is your design. Your method is purely just your questionnaire and some closed questions. That's it. So those are the differences. Okay, I need to go on with this. Sorry. So I hope this makes things a bit clearer. I'm just going to quickly go through these slides. What I wanted to show here was that it depends entirely on the topic. So if you had, for example, the relationship between student grade performance and frequency of face-to-face teaching, You wouldn't necessarily have to interview people. And therefore, the better design you could do will be quantitative only. And that's basically what my next ones are about, is that if you wanted to look at the challenges faced by residential students, maybe it would be better in your study to only look at qualitative rather than quantitative. So it depends entirely on the type of study that you are doing. I apologize for quickly riffing through. Okay, so this is the steps for mixed methods research. You have, first of all, you've got to determine whether it's feasible to do it. Secondly, to identify the rationale. Why do you want to use it? Identify the data collection, strategy, and the type of design. And this depends entirely on three things. Priority, in other words, are you going to make qualitative more important than quantitative, or are they going to be equal? The sequence, are they both going to occur at the same time, or is one going to occur before the other? And visualization. Then you develop the quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods, collect them, analyze the data, and then you write the report. And this could be 1 or 2 phased. So I've got a few more minutes left, so I want to get to the main point here. And this is on point 20. We're on slide 20 here. I hope can you all see slide 20?
Yes, Dr. Nina, we can see your slides.
Okay,
Slide 20.
great.
Yeah.
All right. So what I want to show you here, and I'm going to use the next 10 minutes. As I said, I'm happy to share the slides. They do give you a bit more information. So please excuse me if I skip, but I'd rather do that and then get more questions from you afterwards. You get different types of mixed method studies. You get triangulation, embedded design, explanation, and exploratory. So what I want to, and then under these triangulation, embedded, explanatory, exploratory, you get different versions of them. So if you'll just give me a second, I want to jump slightly, a lot. Okay, so this is the basis of triangulation. And what makes triangulation different from the others, it is because with triangulation, your qualitative and your quantitative have exactly the same emphasis. So here on the left-hand side, I have one method being quantitative, and on the right-hand side, I have one method being quantitative, but they both happen at the same time. Sometimes you'll see they'll say it's parallel or concurrent. And at the end, you have an inference. So please excuse me if I jump to... All right, I just want to show you something quickly when you go through my slides. You can see on slide 25, I've given a description of triangulation. And then what I've done after it is I've given this and then an example of, and how one would do this. So here would be where you've got a focus group and you've got your qualitative would be a focus group, your quantitative would be a survey, and in the synthesis, you actually integrate the information together, and that would be your mixed methods. So there I've given you example, right? Now, with triangulation, this is the convergence model. You have quantitative and you have qualitative, and note how they both have the same amount of emphasis, but they're occurring at the same time. Then what happens is for both, so for quantitative, you're collecting the data, you're analyzing the data, you're getting the results. The same time for qualitative, you're collecting the data, you're analyzing the data, you're getting the results. Then you take the two together, that information of the results, and you then compare and you contrast. And then you interpret both your quantitative and your qualitative results. The other form of triangulation is, and note here your results are converged when you are doing, once you've completed the quantitative and the qualitative part. And this is normally when you want to, the main objective of this is when you want to compare results and as well validate your results. You're using two different approaches to validate one another. Then you have the data transformation model. And in this one, it's very similar to the previous one. However, notice here on the bottom, you have qualitative data collection, qualitative data analysis, then you're transforming your qualitative into quantitative data. So you're coding a document, and from that, you're forming quantitative data. You're able to show a share of, and then you compare and interrelate the two sets. So that's why it's called the data transformation model, because even though you're doing qualitative and quantitative at the same time, on the last step of the qualitative analysis, you take some of that rich data that you've got and you transform it into quantitative data in order to compare and interpret. Then you have the validating quantitative data model. And here you have quantitative a survey, and you might have qualitative being collection open-ended item. Now, I want you to notice something here, and this is where it's different from the other. From the others, your quantitative might have been a survey questionnaire. Your qualitative might have been an interview. They're two different methods. But what you're doing here is this quantitative is a survey questionnaire. So you've got one instrument being a survey questionnaire, and what you're doing here is that survey questionnaire has close-ended and open-ended questions. The close-ended questions you're using for your data analysis, while the open-ended questions you're using for more analysis and your coding. You then bring them together in order to interpret. And it's used when you want to validate and expand on the quantitative findings. So you don't just want to focus on the survey questionnaire, you also want to validate some of the things you've seen in the closed-ended questions. Okay, I'll come to you there. How do you transform qualitative to quantitative? It depends entirely on it, but from your codes, you could then make that, you could look at how do I measure? Can I take some of the codes and form some sort of measurement from your codes? That's my answer. All right. Note that they're using the same instrument. Then this is a multi-level design, and this is one that you can use. Maybe you want different levels. So, for example, when we look at university, you could have one level being management, another one being lecturer, another one being student. Or the different levels could be first, postgrad, undergrad, whatever it is. But you have quantitative, qualitative, and another quantitative, and all of these together will merge into your overall interpretation. And what's nice about this is that you can actually use teams of researchers, each of them specializing in maybe quantitative or qualitative, and tackling different parts of this. So the purpose of this type of research is that you have a very well substantiated conclusion on a single phenomena, but you're just looking at different parts of it. And this also answers your question in terms of how do you transform, and that here this could also, depending on the research, you could either quantify qualitative findings, or you could qualify quantitative. You could quantify qualitative or qualitative. I've put too many mixed up words in this mixed methods. All right, please excuse me if I want to get to this embedded. Right, so this is embedded, and you get different forms of embedded. But as you can see here, you could have a quantitative survey, and then you could ask some qualitative questions just to verify your results. Or it could be qualitative, and you could have a smaller sort of survey questionnaire to see, am I right about my interpretation of my interviews, for example. And then you also get embedded experimental, where you've got different levels. So, for example, you could have qualitative interviews before the intervention. Then you could have a quantitative pre-measure. So say, for example, you want to see what are the challenges of students, and out of the interviews, it then shows that they find that they have issues with technology. So then you could see, right, how are they using the technology before you have an intervention, then you have a post measure, and you have qualitative afterwards to interview them. So it depends entirely on the topic. You also get embedded correlation. And embedded correlation, you'll have different quantitative predictors and a quantitative outcome and a qualitative outcome, and then you'll interpret those results. So there's various different parts of it. Here I've just given you descriptions. Then we get sequential. So sequential is when you have one method first and then the other. And okay, so here you have one method, which is then followed by the other. And I think to try and save a bit of time, as I said, I will share this with you so that you can see what I've done. I just wanted to explain explanatory quickly. So with explanatory, you have one method before the other, and it's always quantitative followed by qualitative. So you have quantitative first, which will, from those results, you'll then have a qualitative, and then you interpret your results based on the quantitative and the qualitative results. So you have two different models. They are the follow-up or the participant selection. And I just want to quickly show you how it works. So you'll start with quantitative. It might be, say, a survey questionnaire. You then analyze the results. You want to know students that might feel unhappy, and therefore from that you can collect the data, and you'll then go, or you might want to know what challenges, identify challenges. Then they'll give you different categories. You then follow up with a qualitative, where you're then doing interviews in terms of these challenges. So you're getting deeper actual explanation and understanding. Then the other type of explanatory is when you have participant selection. So you start with quantitative. You ask who faces a challenge, who feels that they're having an extreme challenge. From that, you'll then pick out all those that said yes. And from that, you then interview them, and that would then be your qualitative. I just want to go to exploratory. Exploratory is different because with exploratory, you start with qualitative and then you end with quantitative. So the two are opposite one another. Explanatory, you always start with quantitative. That is your focus. It leads to qualitative. While this, an exploratory, it starts with qualitative and then it goes to quantitative. Note also here, unlike triangulation, your emphasis is on qualitative and not the two having equal priority. All right, and then you get two different, you get exploratory instrumental and exploratory taxonomy development model. So this is the instrument. So basically from the qualitative, you devise an instrument, okay? So you code, and from that code, you are able to get an actual instrument. From that instrument, you then go into actually a quantitative study. The other one could be your qualitative analysis, and this is taxonomy development. In other words, it is the developing a theory. So from your interviews, you then get a results, and in order to test and validate it, what you then do is you test it in terms of quantitative. Okay, and then these are just a few of my end notes. that note that they differ, and what's important is your research question of your study, and always make consideration of the time, priority, and skills. So I'm happy to actually share. I'm actually happy to share the slides with you. I'm now open for questions. So someone asked me here about the sampling. Sampling basically is according to, even though one can sample, how you sample depends entirely on the different sampling strategies, and that you'll find more under qualitative, but those can be used in mixed methods. Then I've asked, is it possible that you do more than one design in mixed methods? It would depend entirely on what you're looking at. But I would say, and also the level that you're looking at it. So maybe if you're looking at a master's, you could go more, but in depth or different. But if it's, if it's a PhD, but a master's, I would say I would try and rather stick to one type and see which one is actually better. Can you explain the difference between interviews, surveys, and questionnaires? Okay, so an interview, so you can see me. Voila. Okay, so an interview, you are actually in front of the person, asking the person questions. While if you have a survey, you don't see the respondent. And that can be an online or something like that. A questionnaire, okay. We often call it a survey questionnaire, because if it's a survey, that's something that you'll get at a restaurant. Were you happy with my service? But it's normally a survey questionnaire because it goes into more detail. And that would depend on how many closed or open-ended questions you would have. Are there any other questions? I can open up for a few minutes. I'm sorry that I went fast, but you'll see the slides that you can go through carefully. And I think it's mixed methods. It's a very mixed up thing. But I think when you go through, I've put enough detail that you can see what's going on and understand it and really try and digest it, because it is a lot of information at once. And if you ever want any questions, you're also welcome to contact me.
Dr. Nina, we really
Yes.
want to thank you for your time in this absolute super helpful, informative session. And we really appreciate your time and taking part in our Research Week session. And for the first time, the data transformation model is making sense to me. And your slide about the steps for conducting a mixed method study was also super helpful. And if it's okay with you, I think we are going to share your slides and this recording with a lot of students
Oh,
in
sure, it's fine.
future
Yes.
as well. I think we have run out of time. I don't see any more questions. Open-ended questions, example, please. I saw even the questions regarding the difference between interviews, surveys, and questionnaires. Those sort of information is also available on, I shared the link in the chat, on the database that we subscribe to, Sage Research Methods Online, that will give you the definitions and the difference between all these different research concepts as well. So please feel free to use that as well. Dr. Nina, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone. And please, if there's any questions, you are most welcome to contact me at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. And for all the attendance, I hope we'll see you again in some of our other research sessions as well.
Yes.
Thank you all,
Thank you
and
so
bye.
much. Bye.